I found out that there were actually a lot of couples like this around the world.
Now, this is a fantastic film, and I've been honoured to get a preview screening here in Australia, and I've watched it twice now. Actually, found the second time even better.
The father and daughter, son and mother, even grandmother and grandson couples around the world that had fallen romantically in love after being separated for decades. And there was a US adoption agency that did a study about reunions, and 50% of them ended up in feelings of attraction. And when I saw that figure, I realized this is not a small phenomenon. Like it's a lot more widespread than we'd like to think, and we just don't know about it because it's so highly illegal in probably every country in the world. So yeah, that's I just thought it was a story worth telling, and through this one couple, Sally and Sam, that I chose as my main characters. So it's definitely 100% fictional story. It's not based on any one couple, but my initial interest towards the subject came from an article about a real couple. I personally hadn't seen anything similar before I wrote this film.
How is exploring women's complex sexuality a feminist act for you?
I just feel like we need to explore females and other genders that are traditionally not so well represented on screen to every extent, sexually, emotionally, with all their choices about their lives and all the events that happen to them and how that forms a human being. And I just feel like for too long we've had this Madonna whore, these two extremes, and those are the only kind of archetypes that women are supposed to be, one or the other, and that's not reality. Like, I just have to look at my own life and the characters of female identifying people that I know, and they have made bad choices. They have made morally bad choices in their life. I have made morally bad choices in my life, and it's just unfortunate that we haven't been given too many female characters in our film history that do have all of these layers about their characters, and that still too often the role of the female in the film is being a mother, being a lover, being a girlfriend, rather than this human that we are with everything that we are. And that's not just to do with our romantic or our sexual interests, it's to do with work, career, yes, having children if you decide to have children, perhaps not, your friendships, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your friends. Like, there's a whole heap of women's life that we just unfortunately haven't seen a lot on film until maybe just the very last recent years, when it's picking up a little bit. And I just think we need to keep picking it up, and yeah, just show women, filthy and imperfect, and making mistakes, and also making good choices, and everything in between, and then how that makes up a life for an individual. Yeah, I think as a filmmaker, and I guess as someone that most people would see as a female, I particularly don't feel necessarily as any particular gender, but I can see how people will put me in the female box, and that's okay if that means that I can represent female filmmakers. I'm happy to be in that box for that reason. But yeah, I just feel like we are in a position where it's almost our responsibility to create multi-layered female characters that haven't been seen before, and not just strong women, weak women, women that are not Madonnas or whores, but a little bit of both, just real. So that seems to be the biggest contributor to this phenomena called genetic sexual attraction is that if you do lack that life that people usually have together, if they grow up in the same childhood home, for example, it's very uncommon under those circumstances to feel feelings of attraction towards your family members. So yes, that is the Westermarck effect. But then the opposite often happens when you haven't known each other. You have been separated at birth, and then perhaps decades have gone by before you see each other, and the first time you meet is as adults. And that seems to be when these particular relationships happen and are started. I think that's something that I have to be prepared for. And I would, yeah, I mean, of course, I don't want anyone to walk out of the cinema, but also I have to be prepared for that. But I guess the way I look at it is that I rather make films that are interesting to some than films that are nice to everyone. And I want my viewer to have an experience they can't get anywhere else. And I want them to see something that's new and fresh and something they perhaps haven't thought about before. And if in that process they end up being confronted, perhaps that's a good thing. Perhaps that means that they're going to think about it for a little bit longer than they would have done otherwise. And yeah, look, if someone feels a need to walk out, they can do so, definitely. I just hope it's not because the film was boring. I hope it was for other reasons.
Talking about the character of Sam, he's very, to me, happy-go-lucky, quite a likable sort of guy, despite all that he's been through, because he's been through quite a lot from such a young age. Was that your intention, to write him as a likable character?
I like to write characters that are multi-layered, and then I feel like it's up to the viewer to make up their mind whether they like them or not. And I'm pleased to hear that you did like Sam, because there was another reviewer that did not like Sam at all. And that's their choice. Yeah, like I think that Sam, for me, Sam is someone who's just very, very independent out of necessity, because they haven't had a very strong or emotionally supportive start of their life. They really haven't had many people that they can depend on and or to be vulnerable with. And yeah, I feel like Sam is just someone who's had to become this sort of quite easygoing person out of necessity, and that happy-go-lucky attitude is what gets him through life. It's totally self-funded. So I'm the writer, director, producer. So all the very difficult pitching conversations were mainly with myself. Can I make this film? Yes, you can. But yeah, there was one particular conversation that I remember at the American Film Market 2016, where I was talking to a distributor and sort of weighing up which film to make next. So at this point, I had just completed my first feature film, Innuendo, but I had several screenplays that I'd written, and very different screenplays. And then I had a few ideas. At this point, Westermarck Effect was really just an idea. I'd read the article, I'd come up with an idea that this could potentially be a film, but I hadn't actually written the screenplay yet. And I just went through telling this particular distributor about a few of my ideas, few of my screenplays that I'd written, in order to seek for his opinion on which one to make. Because at the end of the day, I don't make films for myself. I make them for an audience to watch. So I do like hearing other people's opinions as well of what in my work resonates with them, so that that gives me sort of a little bit of guidance. And I just will always remember his advice was that I just need to make the story that I feel most strongly about, and that will be the one that will be most interesting for the audience as well. And Westermarck Effect, it was just such a curious subject matter for me, and such a multi-layered, psychologically interesting story, where I felt like both of my two main characters and everyone around them was going to have very, very authentic human experiences in a form of a fictional role because of this challenging situation that they've been put into. And that's what I wanted to explore. And that's what made it so interesting for me. I guess I'm very ambitious emotionally, and I just want to learn. Life doesn't make a lot of sense, and art for me is a great way of trying to understand myself better, people around me better, the motivations, what leads us into making the choices that we do make, the external influences, but also all the internal conflict that we have to go through. It's just enormous. And for me, writing and then telling a story in the form of a film is the best way for me personally to explore all that. And I really hope that some of that translates itself into the final product, and viewers can also enjoy that journey. So Innuendo was the first feature film released in 2017, and yeah, I had a limited release for that at the Cinema Nova here in Melbourne. Westermarck Effect now will be at the Lido Cinemas in Hawthorne, and yeah, it is such a struggle. I actually feel like there would be an audience for these kind of more fringe films that have been made very independently and don't have a lot of budget behind them. I feel like people would be interested in seeing those stories if only they were more accessible to them. If these films were given larger platforms to be seen, yeah, I strongly believe that people are curious creatures and want to see fresh things that they haven't seen before. So I was very lucky to premiere the film at the Cannes Film Festival, which is obviously one of the biggest film festivals in the world. And my independently made film, of course, was in the, like, there's different categories of the Cannes Film Festival. It's a massive festival, and there's all these different hierarchies and categories. And so I was a very small fish in a very big pond. But of course, that's a great way to launch a film, and so that felt really special. And then it's been at the Influx Entertainment Film Awards at the US, for example, where it won the best film, and I personally won the best director. Just more recently, it was at the Veracruz World Film Festival in Mexico. Again, very lucky to win the best film and best director for me, and Jaden Denk was best actor as well, which was great. It's I thought he did so well in his role, and it was his first, not just the first feature film role, it was his first film role ever, and I thought he just did really well, and I'm really glad that he gets that recognition as well of his skills and his talent. Saw him at the casting alongside a lot of other actors, and yeah, we had 100 people audition for that role, and 20 of them made it to the round of auditions that I ran with a few associates, and 3 of those 20 actors really captured our imagination, and yeah, Jaden Denk was one that got selected, and I was very, very happy with that choice. I think he captures Sam's personality and brought him to life better than I would have imagined. Yes, I wrote the first scene of the film very much on purpose, the way it is, and it is perhaps a little bit shocking. It's definitely on your face. I think it just immediately grasps your attention and imagination, and that's what I wanted to do with it. I just feel like I need to go back to myself as a viewer. How do I watch films? How do I, if I'm flicking channels on my TV, my attention span is very short. It's a few seconds up to a few minutes. And if the first minutes of the film don't don't cause some kind of an emotional impact in me, I won't be that interested, and I will probably change channels. I might not watch the whole thing. And so for me, it's now very important to sort of make impact straight away. Just start big. And by that, I don't necessarily mean like a big action sequence, but emotionally big, and something that causes me to think about something, so that then I'm more keen to sit through the whole thing. And I'd like to think that as a filmmaker, I make some progress. And I think my first film was a little bit meandering in its beginning, innuendo. It was sort of almost like a dream-like beginning, and like beautiful visuals, I think, but like it took a little bit of time to build up. So I'd like to think that Westermarck Effect has a stronger beginning. I think it's more impactful. And yeah, wow, that is a big question. I just think art in general has got a lot bigger impact in us than we realize, because it does tap into our imagination and our subconscious. And I find that is the thing that a lot of different people and communities are trying to tap into. I mean, there's whole advertising courses about tapping into people's subconscious, because somehow that's believed to be where we make our choices essentially, and where we sort of really, we're not necessarily fully aware, but that is like the basis of our decision making essentially as human beings. So for me, the fact that true fiction and true art, you can have this almost like a direct channel into that region of a human being and human beings' experience of being alive. I feel like that's an enormous opportunity for a filmmaker or for any artist to express what they want to express, or to explore something that they want to explore. And I strongly believe that I'm not the one to provide any answers. As an artist, I'm just there to ask the questions, and perhaps the questions that no one else has asked before. And that's essentially my job, is to just raise questions, start conversations. And I'm someone who hasn't lived a very straight sort of conventional life. I have been challenged in many ways, and I think I'd like to bring my wealth of experience in this life into my films. And my films are definitely not my own stories yet. Of course, I can't steer away from that. As a writer, director, producer, they're very personal, but they're still fully fictional. Maybe one day I'll be in a position where I can tell my own story, and I'll be strong enough to do that. But so far they've been more or less stories that are not my own personal stories. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity to just tell very diverse stories, and to just get away from this black and white thinking of that so many films in the history keep repeating. We've got the baddies and we've got the goodies, and then there's conflict and the goodies have to win. Or maybe in your darker stories, maybe sometimes the baddies can win, but there's not a lot of gray areas, and that's disappointing for me as a filmmaker, because in real life humans have all of those things in them. They've got good in them and bad in them, and more often than not these two are in one person. And then there's 7 billion of us. Is it 7 or 9 billion? I forget. Of us living in this planet and trying to negotiate living in this planet and trying to survive together and trying to make something of our lives and trying to be happy. And I think the original question was about intimacy, was it?
Yes, aesthetics of intimacy, yeah, sexual politics.
Yeah, I feel like I've sort of gone quite far, and I'm really struggling to like give you a very simple answer to this question, because I don't feel like it's a simple thing to ask. An interesting question. And I guess if we would take away the entire incest out of it, and it would just be an older man with a younger woman, that wouldn't even be a question. We've seen films like that over the decades, over and over and over again, with no questions asked. And it seems like it's just a completely accepted and almost assumed that that's normal. Why is it still such taboo for it to be the other way around? That's something that for me makes no sense whatsoever, having been born into this body that I have, which most people would, I suppose, say that is a female body. And whilst I don't necessarily feel that way myself, I'm not necessarily someone that sees myself in any gender box, but I respect that most people will see me as a female, so let's just call me a female filmmaker. Yeah, it for me it doesn't make any sense that that it should be so accepted that a younger woman is with an older man in a sort of a heteronormative relationship, but that it shouldn't happen the other way around. I personally don't see it as an issue. I feel like if two consenting adults have relationships, whatever ages they are, if they are adults, they're both willing, that's a non-issue for me. I'm not saying anything about illegal activities, or like I don't want to, as a filmmaker, I don't want to point fingers at my characters, and I don't want to make the moral choice whether this relationship that's essentially incestuous love story as well, because the two main characters are biologically related. It's not my choice, and it's not my moral standing to make that choice for my viewer. My job is just to tell their story and to try and show those characters and all of their internal conflicts around this situation that they've arrived in, and then I think that it's up to my viewer to make up their own mind how they feel about it, and I hope I've been able to deliver that film.
True about what you say, there probably wouldn't be questioned at all if it was an older man, younger woman scenario, because we're so used to seeing that over the decades and centuries. So it's very interesting when we see it the other way around, and the pressure that's put on her, and you play that role so authentically and well. It's you put so much into it, and you're a completely different person to the person I'm interviewing right now. It's really interesting divide there. Best of luck with your film. Will it be coming up to Sydney as far as you know?
I really hope so. Look, if it was up to me, it would be in every cinema, in every city, in every country in the world. Unfortunately, it's not up to me to make those choices. I can only just keep pushing it with my resources that I have as an independent filmmaker. I certainly would hope so. And if any Sydney cinema owners are watching this, please get in touch. I would love to show it there. I believe that there's an audience, and I believe people are interested in fresh material, new films that they haven't seen. And yeah, I think it would be a commercially a wise choice to program my film.